Hey guys, tonight we set out on a quiet, winding journey through the soft sands and whispering winds of Central Asia. The moon is high above the steppe, casting a silver sheen on an ancient caravan road where camels grunt softly, and the lanterns of traders flicker like fireflies. You're bundled in layers of woven wool, the scent of spiced dates and cured leather filling the dry desert air, as the caravan creaks to life beneath a sky freckled with stars. Don't be fooled by the stillness. This road once connected empires, from China to Rome. Traders moved not just goods but gossip, gods, and peculiar superstitions. The Sogdian merchants, your traveling companions tonight, spoke many tongues, served many kings, and wore some deeply questionable patterned robes. And honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this. Between sandstorms, bribery, poisoned wells, and camel politics, ancient Silk Route life wasn't all cinnamon and sunshine. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, while you're at it, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You mount your camel before dawn, the sky still a bruised velvet. The caravan is already moving, an endless line of shaggy humps, bundled wares, and sleepy-eyed traders humming under their breath. The camel beneath you shifts its weight, sighs, and begins the plodding rhythm that will define your days for the next few months. No one's in a rush out here. Trade is slow, deliberate, silk is delicate, porcelain shatters if you so much as sneeze wrong. So you ride gently, the way your guide taught you. Sway with the beast, don't fight it. Eventually, your spine will stop complaining. Somewhere ahead, someone's burning frankincense. It drifts back in little trails, mixing with the scent of dried apricots and woolen cloaks that haven't seen a wash basin in weeks. You'd complain, but honestly, you're starting to like it. Your pack is heavy. Bolts of shimmering Chinese silk, chunks of lapis lazuli, handfuls of saffron, a tiny jade frog that jingles mysteriously when you shake it. You didn't pack it. No one admits they did. Suspicious, as the sun crests over the dunes, golden light spills across the road. You pass a cluster of scrubby acacia trees where some goats blink at you, like you interrupting a private meeting. A Sogdian trader named Bara, short, round, smells like cardamom, rides up beside you. He grins, missing a few teeth. You'll hate the food in Dunhuang, he says cheerfully. Tastes like boiled dust and onion dreams. You thank him. This is the warmest warning you've gotten in days. The rhythm of the caravan is hypnotic. Camels grunt and shuffle. Bells jingle softly from their necks. One of the guards, a lanky man who insists he once arm wrestled a cushion prince, hums something. Tuneless, you start humming along. Then you see it, the first way station. Just a scattering of mud brick huts, a tethering post, and a bored teenager selling dates for a price that would make your ancestors faint. Still, you pay. They're warm and weirdly good. The day wears on. You pass sandbanks where wind has carved delicate wave patterns. You dodge a stubborn donkey who absolutely refuses to move. You sip from your water, skin lukewarm, slightly dusty, like everything out here. And as the sun begins to lower again, painting the hills in tones of peach and honey, the caravan makes camp. The camels groan with relief. Tents go up with practiced ease. Someone starts a fire. Someone else starts snoring loudly. You sit beside the fire, cross-legged on a woven mat, sharing chickpeas with Baras. He tells you stories about a merchant who once tried to smuggle an entire elephant in wooden crates, about a deal gone wrong because someone mistook nutmeg for bat droppings. Historians still argue either Sogdians actually spread Buddhism into China, or whether they simply made a profit while someone else did. What's clear is this: they were the thread between the great empires, stitching worlds together with nothing more than clever words, silk bolts, and a dangerous sense of curiosity. The stars come out again, thousands of them. You lean back, resting your head against your pack. The camel beside you sneezes, wetly. You don't even flinch anymore. You're not just moving goods. You're moving stories, ideas, spices people can't pronounce, dreams people can't afford. Out here, that's power. Soft, quiet power, the kind you barely notice until it's rewoven half the world. You wake to the quiet clinking of camel harnesses and the low murmurs of traders, heating breakfast over the embers of last night as fire. The air is sharp and cool, the kind of cold that kisses your fingertips and lingers in your nose. You stretch, bones crackling like brittle parchment, and sit up beneath the still indigo sky. It's map day. You gather round a threadbare cloth stretched over a flat rock. Bara spreads out his prized possession, a map stitched not with lines, but with stories. Tiny drawings of temples, rivers, mountains, and cities dot the linen, annotated with things like Don T. Trust the melon seller and bridge made of dreams or very old rope. You trace your route with a calloused finger. East lies the Gansu corridor, a long throat of earth pinched between desert and mountain. Westward, the road splits like a river delta towards Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, and eventually the outer edges of the Roman Empire. The Silk routes were never one clean road, despite what modern textbooks suggest. They were messy, like your pack after a sandstorm, more like spiderwebs threads overlapping, branching, breaking, and reweaving. A Sogdian merchant might make it from Chang'an to Antioch, or he might disappear into the Taklamakan desert forever, his bones ground into the sand like misplaced punctuation. The caravan rolls out slowly today. Your camel stares at you with sleepy disdain as you climb back on. You think she's named Sorghum, or maybe she's just really into ancient grains. The path becomes rocky, less sand and more pebbles. The sound of hoofs crunching against stone echoes in your ears. You pass a carved milestone with faint script, maybe Parthian, maybe just an overambitious shepherd with too much time and a chisel. A trader behind you recounts the legend of the singing sands. Dunes that hum. When the wind hits just right, ghosts, someone mutters, just air, counters another. A third claims, it's the spirits of failed negotiators who tried to sell fake cinnamon. Bara shrugs, ghosts make better stories. You cross a narrow valley where the wind funnels in strong gusts. It tugs at your sleeves, your scarf, your patience. You pass a crumbling tower once used to signal distant caravans with polished bronze mirrors. Historians still argue whether this method ever worked, or if merchants just liked having excuses for late rivals. The land flattens again, stretching into a shimmering heat mirage. Somewhere in the haze, you spot distant movement, another caravan, or a trick of light. One of the guards raises a hand in half-hearted greeting. The figures never respond. By midday, you stop at a well. It's little more than a stone circle with a bucket and a pulley, but it might as well be a palace. The water is clear, cold, and tinged with minerals. You drink too fast and immediately regret it. A Sogdian boy offers you dried figs in exchange for a story. You tell him about your neighbor back home who thought geese were cursed. He accepts this as fact. Maps may guide the body, but stories guide the journey. Every caravaner you meet seems to know a slightly different version of the route, sprinkled with personal bias. Never take the left fork near Khotan, says one, unless you enjoy sand in places. Sand should never go. That evening, you camp near a ruined caravanserai, an old fortress-like inn. For traders and animals, vines climb its cracked walls, and bats roost in its hollow towers. Baraz says it was once owned by a woman named Zarnagar who could haggle the buttons off your coat. Without you noticing, the fire crackles. A bowl of lentil stew warms your hands. Sorghum the camel licks your shoulder affectionately. Or maybe she just thinks you taste salty. Above you, the stars come out once more, dancing in familiar constellations. You trace them with your eyes, trying to imagine what they looked like to those who rode this path 1,000 years ago. Wrapped in wool and worry, you fall asleep with the map folded under your head, the ink smudged slightly from your breath. You wake up with the map still crumpled beneath your cheek, faint ink patterns now faintly mirrored on your face. Bars finds this hilarious. He says you look like a cursed cartographer. You squint into the morning light and grumble something non-committal, then grab your boots still damp with camel drew and slide them on. Today, you're riding with the Sogdians. You've heard them before, of course, chattering around the fire in 5 languages, arguing over the value of turquoise versus pistachios. But now, you're in their orbit properly. One of them, Rakshan, weary and fast-talking, pulls you into their group like a stray coin caught in a sleeve fold. Sogdians are, to put it gently, professional talkers. They haggle like opera singers. They tell jokes with punchlines that travel to languages deep. One moment, Rakshan is reciting a Zoroastrian hymn. The next, he is selling a used belt to a Bactrian prince's cousin, while explaining why peaches from Fergana taste like sun-kissed silk. Soft power, they call it now, but back then, it was just charisma. You learn quickly. Being Sogdian means knowing what everyone wants before they know they want it. A Tang general? He's not after coins, he wants a falcon that screams like thunder. A Buddhist monk, incense from India with a note of myrrh. A nomadic chief, a chess set with horses carved like gods. The Sogdians speak Chinese, Persian, Saka, Sanskrit, and something they just call market whisper. You're not entirely sure that last one isn't made up. Baras says, we don't conquer, we connect. Historians still argue whether the Sogdians were primarily traders, diplomats, or something closer to cultural chameleons. What's clear is this: they left their mark in graffiti, scrawled in caravanserai stairwells, in wedding contracts between merchants and locals, and in children born with names that blend empires. You pass through a shallow valley where once stood the city of Panjikent, a place now whispered about more than seen. Back then, it had temples, workshops, music, theater, and frescoes with eyes that seemed to follow you. Today, only wind and ruins. Rakshan tells you about a Sogdian painter from Panjikent, who once depicted a Roman general eating noodles. Historically questionable, he admits, but good for business. He says it with a wink. As you ride, the land begins to change again. Hills roll into low steps. Trees grow in deliberate lines planted for windbreaks, or maybe aesthetics. You spot a group of riders in embroidered cloaks. Sogdians, too, by the look of them. You exchange glances, cautious nods. You ask Baras how he can tell they're Sogdian from this far away. He snorts. Their boots. No one else ties them like that. Over lunch, someone pulls out a set of bone dice and a game begins. It quickly devolves into multilingual cursing and loud accusations of cheating, followed by communal laughter and shared raisins. You're still not sure who won, or what game it was. That night, the Sogdians put on a little performance: just a flute, a drum, and a dancer in robes the color of sunset. You sit in the dust, full of lentils and slightly sunburned, lulled by the rhythm. The dancer's shadow flickers against the tent wall, her hands tracing stories in the air. A lover lost, a merchant triumphant, a camel that refuses to kneel. You start to realize the Sogdian's secret isn't in the silk or the gold. It's in the way they make you feel like you've been here before, like you belong. Before sleep, Rakshan hands you a scroll. Read it tomorrow, he says. It's a love poem, or a tax record, hard to tell. You smile. That's the silk roots for you. You're still squinting at the scroll Rakshan gave you the night before. The script curls like lazy smoke across the parchment, full of flourishes that may or may not be deliberate. You're pretty sure it's Sogdian, or maybe a very sleepy form of Sanskrit. Either way, you've been staring at it for 20 minutes, and all you've confirmed is that the second word might be peach or tax. You tuck it back into your pouch and ride on. The air is cooler today. A breeze from the north carries the scent of dry grass and something faintly smoky, like old fires. The path snakes into open plains now, the kind that ripple in waves when the wind runs across them. You can see yurts on the horizon, round tents like faded pearls dropped by wandering hands. By mid-morning, the caravan slows. Riders approach, nomads in thick felt robes and long braids. Their horses lean and alert. Their leader, a woman with sharp eyes and a fox fur collar, dismounts. No one speaks at first. Then Bara steps forward with the slow confidence of someone who's played this scene many times. He greets them not with words, but with gifts: a handful of almonds, a twist of dried apricot, a bolt of green silk. It's not bribery, it's etiquette. Hospitality along the silk routes flows both ways, especially when armed strangers are involved. You're invited into the yurts. Inside, it's warmer than you expect. Felt walls keep out the chill, and there's a low fire burning in a bronze basin. You're offered Eric fermented mare's milk. It smells like sour yogurt and ambition. You take a sip, because everyone is watching. It's an experience. Your throat burns a little, your eyes water slightly, and your tongue is now unsure who it works for. A boy plays a two-stringed lute near the fire. The sound is high and wistful, like a song sung to a lost bird. The woman in fox fur begins to speak, not in Sogdian, but in a Turkic dialect. One of the merchants translates. She asks about your caravan, where you're headed, what you're carrying, whether the peach taxes are going up again. Apparently that scroll has a reputation. You trade. Gossip. 2 stories of bandits near the Kashgar Pass. Of a Chinese general who accidentally married his translator. Of a sacred goose that disrupted a major deal by laying an egg on an imperial seal. The woman laughs. Geese, she says, in your language, too bold for their own good. Historians still argue whether the Sogdians genuinely integrated into nomadic cultures or simply adapted to survive. But sitting here, with your boots off, sipping weird milk and listening to a song that might be a lullaby or a threat depending on the tempo, it feels less like diplomacy and more like human routine. Before you leave, the woman gives Baras a gift, a small carved bone pendant shaped like a horse's head. No explanation, no instructions. Back outside, Sorghum the camel is deeply offended that you smell like horse. The caravan moves on, but slowly. The landscape is wide open now. Hawks circle overhead. The only shade is your shadow, stretching long across the earth. The wind hums low, like a sleeping animal. By dusk, you reach a narrow river. It bubbles over smooth stones, shallow and clear. You wade through, lifting your robes, water biting at your ankles. On the other side, a copse of trees offers the promise of camp. Dinner tonight is barley flatbread and something suspiciously crunchy. Baraz insists it's toasted lentils. You suspect it's rocks. Everyone's too tired to argue. Before bed, Rakshan tells you a story about a Sogdian merchant who once sold dragon bones to a Roman ambassador. They were actually just fossilized fish. The ambassador named them an official emblem anyway. You fall asleep thinking about that. How the line between truth and story is thinner out here. Maybe it's not about what's real. Maybe it's about what sells. The next morning, you wake up nose to nose with a Bactrian camel, not sorghum. Surprisingly, this one has a lopsided grin and one entirely judgmental eye. You blink. It blinks. Mutual suspicion achieved. Baraz chuckles nearby. That's Ginger. She thinks your blanket is hers. Now, you blink again. She does not move. You manage to negotiate your blanket back with the strategic placement of an apple core. And a gentle push. The day begins. Today's lesson. Never underestimate the weird durability of a camel, especially the two-humped kind. Bactrian camels are the tanks of the Silk Route's shaggy tanks with social issues. They carry heavy loads, survive on salty shrubs, and spit with deeply personal accuracy. You spend the morning riding beside one of the camel masters, a grizzled man with a face like baked leather and a deep affection for animals that grunt. He tells you how Bactrians can survive for OC winters, how their thick eyelashes block sandstorms, and how some caravans gave them nicknames like furnace-footed cloud-eaters. You try not to laugh. He's serious. As the sun climbs, the caravan winds into a landscape of red rock canyons. The road here is barely wide enough for the camel's wide-set feet, and the echoes bounce in strange ways. Somewhere, a raven caws. Baraz claims it's saying, "Nice hat." You're not convinced. You reach a small settlement built into the canyon walls, mud brick structure stacked like honeycomb. Children run alongside the camels, yelling words you don't recognize. One throws a fig at sorghum. She eats it. Possibly the child. Till you lose track. Inside the village, the caravan halts to barter. You help unload the goods. Silk bolts, spices, glass beads from Alexandria, and a carved ivory comb that Baraz swears once belonged to a Persian queen. No one asks questions. That's the vibe. You watch the negotiations unfold like a choreographed dance. The Sogdians lead, palms open, faces neutral. The local merchants respond in kind. There's much squinting, much silence, and then suddenly a burst of laughter, and hands clasped in deal-making. Soft power isn't flashy. It's in the way the Sogdians mirror. Gestures, the way they speak just enough of every language to ease the air, the way they always, somehow, get invited to dinner afterward. Historians still argue whether Sogdians were respected or merely tolerated by the great empires they passed through. But out here, among isolated communities and tired travelers, they are essential. They are bridges made of boots and bargaining. You wander the edge of the settlement while trade buzzes behind you. A group of women are dyeing cloth in giant earthen pots. The smell of fermented indigo hits your nose like a blue slab. You sneeze. They laugh kindly. One of them offers you a square of cloth deep purple, slightly uneven. You trade a story for it. How your cousin once tried to teach a goose to swim upstream. It failed. Spectacularly. The women clap in delight. That night, the village hosts the caravan in a wide central courtyard. There's music, pipes, drums, and a singer with a voice like smoke. Flatbread is passed, bowls of yogurt, pickled turnips, and something that might be yak, or camel, or very confused beef. You sit next to the camel master. He tells you about his favorite Bactrian, a stubborn creature named Mustard who once kicked over a governor's tent. He tears up a little. Best day of my life. As you chew a piece of tough meat and stare at the flickering shadows on the wall, you realize something. This isn't just a trade route. It's a highway of humanity, padded with hooves, laughter, and the occasional edible mistake. The stars return. They always do. And beneath them, the camels groan, the merchants sleep. And somewhere in the dark, Ginger plots another blanket heist. The next day, you're up before sunrise, again. It's becoming a ritual. The soft shuffling of feet, the slow hiss of boiling tea, and the constant, soul-deep groaning of camels who were very clear about not signing up for this shift. You help reload the caravan, your hands stiff from sleep. The bundles are heavier now, not just silk, but sacks of dried pomegranates, bundles of painted fans, and something suspiciously shaped like a taxidermied parrot. Baraz insists it's ceremonial. You don't ask questions anymore. Today, it's inventory time. You ride next to a tall woman named Oshar, a trader from the Fergana Valley, whose ledgers are rumored to be neater than most temple scrolls. She tracks everything: dates, spices, perfumes, lapis lazuli, and occasionally which trader borrowed someone else's boots. She teaches you how to identify goods by smell and touch. You close your eyes and she presses bundles into your hands. The first, cinnamon, sweet and woody, with a hint of mystery, probably from Ceylon, maybe fake. Second, saffron threads, dry and fragile, almost weightless, worth their weight in myths. Third, myrrh, sharp and resinous, tastes like regret, Oshar says cheerfully. Fourth, dried squid, a gift for someone in Merv with very specific tastes. She explains, deadpan. The caravan clinks and creaks, its scent now a swirling mix of spices, oils, wool, and ambition. You ride past the bundles of silk, vivid crimsons, water-clear blues, and yellows so bright they seem to hum. Silk isn't just soft, it's a message, a power move. In some cities, to wear a robe from Chang'an was to wear political gravity. And then there are the peacock feathers. You find them tucked into a crate of ginger, long, iridescent, and definitely not on the official list. Baraz shrugs when you point them out. For flair, he says, peacocks sell stories. Historians still debate how much of the silk routes was actual high-value trade and how much was theater, drama, performance, storytelling. Items like feathers, dyed shells, and mirrored beads weren't necessities. They were currency for the imagination. By late morning, the sun is blazing. Sipping lukewarm tea and watching Sorghum try to steal a date from a sleeping guard's pocket. She succeeds, elegantly. Sold this twice, she says, but it always comes back. You joke that maybe it's haunted. She grins. No, it just refuses to be boring. The caravan moves again, winding past wine-shaped stones, and the occasional scraggly bush with ambition. You pass a man on a donkey, old, dusty, humming to himself. He has nothing to trade, just stories. He says he once saw a tiger in the desert. It asked him for directions. You nod solemnly. Sounds plausible. As evening creeps in, the air cools and the light softens. Shadows stretch long. You stop at a wide salt flat, where the sky reflects in thin pools of water, as if the world flipped upside down. The camels walk slowly through this mirror land, their shapes elongated, their grunts echoing off nothing. You camp on a rise above the salt. The goods are unpacked, laid in a careful circle around the fire. You eat something stew-like and vaguely spicy while Baraz tells a tale of a merchant who accidentally invented soup by dropping his entire spice pouch into a pot of boiling water. It sold well, of course. That night, you roll into your blanket, head resting on a bundle of saffron-scented linen. The caravan hums around you, soft conversations fading into the hiss of the wind. Somewhere, a bell rings just once from a camel's harness. You close your eyes. The smells linger. On your fingers, silk, spice, smoke, and a little bit of fermented regret. You've carried goods all day, but what sticks with you isn't weight, it's texture, it's scent. It is the question of who will unwrap these bundles next and what story they'll be told. You're jolted awake at dawn by someone not naming names. Sorghum chewing loudly and aggressively near your ear. It takes a moment to realize it's not your blanket she's munching, but a decorative tassel that used to belong to Rakshan's boots. A minor tragedy. He forgives her. Immediately. She has an eye for color. He sighs. Today, you're heading towards Samarkand. Well, not the city yet, but the outer sphere of its influence. Even out here, days away from its gates, you start to feel it, a shift in tempo, in conversation, in mood. Samarkand isn't just a dot on the map. It's a gravitational pull, a hub of rumor and romance, trade and theater. The kind of place people describe with wistful sighs and suspiciously conflicting details. Baraz claims he once sold cinnamon-scented candles to a noblewoman there, who kept pigeons with tiny earrings. Rakshan insists he fell in love with a librarian who could recite every law of the Kushan Empire. Backward, historians still debate how much of the city's reputation was real and how much came from Sogdian flair for embellishment. You followed the caravan along a dusty trail carved into the foothills. The land rolls gently, dotted with almond trees and low stone terraces. A breeze carries the scent of roasting barley and distant hearth fires. By midday, the caravan halts by a sun-bleached milestone carved with floral patterns and ancient script. We're close, Baraz says. This is where the cafes start. He isn't joking. Not cafes in the modern sense, no latte art or overworked baristas, but shaded courtyards, open-fronted tea stalls, and street corners where traders sip hot brews from curved cups and share tales too exaggerated to challenge. You arrive at one such place by late afternoon. It's a large tent pitched beside a well, with patterned rugs spread across the ground and wide cushions for tired travelers. The air smells like mint and cardamom. You sit cross-legged, your feet grateful, your back less so. A young boy brings you tea in a chipped porcelain cup, the edges worn soft with use. You take a sip, strong, astringent, with a note of honey, the kind of flavor that makes your shoulders drop half an inch and your toes uncurl. Around you, the cafe hums. There is an elderly trader loudly proclaiming that he once rode from Antioch to Chang'an without a single blister. A pair of musicians tune a battered flute and a skin drum. A woman with a jeweled veil unrolls lengths of patterned silk, murmuring prices to a group of students who absolutely cannot afford any of it. You eavesdrop shamelessly. One man swears he saw a Greek philosopher teaching numerology to a Sogdian merchant. Another counters with a story about a snow leopard trained to guard a warehouse in Bukhara. Someone starts arguing about pepper tariffs, and the mood briefly dips before a perfectly timed joke revives it. It's theater, yes, but also something more. These cafes aren't just rest stops. They're informal embassies, rumor exchanges, language schools, and sometimes matchmakers. Here, over tiny porcelain cups, deals are made, alliances forged, and the occasional accidental betrothal arranged. Baras leans toward you. You want real news? Forget messengers. Ask the tea servers. You glance at the boy who served your cup. He's now chatting with the spice merchant, nodding seriously. You wonder how many languages he speaks, how many secrets he carries like sugar cubes in his apron pocket. You stay until dusk. The air cools, and lanterns are lit, small ceramic oil pots hanging from thin wires, casting soft amber glows. Someone sings a lullaby in a language you don't know. It's haunting and lovely. As the caravan gathers again to move toward the next camp, you feel something cling to you, not dust, not fatigue, but that peculiar blend of belonging and anonymity the silk roots specialize in here. Everyone's a guest and a player. Everyone's trading something, even if it's just a good story. You fall asleep that night under a low almond tree, the scent of mint tea still lingering in your nose, your dreams full of silk, soft music, and pigeon earrings. The next leg of the journey begins beneath a thick morning mist, curling low round your feet as if the earth itself hasn't quite woken up. The world feels hushed, muffled, like walking through the beginning of a dream. Your boots squelch in damp soil. Sorghum steps with exaggerated care, as though the fog might trip her. Today, you're not carrying spices or silk. You're carrying something stranger, knowledge. The caravan is transporting a small collection of scrolls and papers, some bound in silk, others wrapped in brittle bark, and you, lucky traveler, have been roped into guarding them. They're worthless to thieves, Oshar assures you, but to scholars, priceless. You take her word for it. To you, they mostly smell like old mushrooms and regret. As the caravan moves on, Rakshan rides beside you and explains that this stretch of the journey is less about goods and more about information. Some of these scrolls are religious texts, others are medical diagrams, and a few are diplomatic letters written in such cautious, flowery prose that they make your eyes cross. Still, the idea fascinates you. Paper, as mundane as it seems now, is one of the great commodities of the silk routes. China had mastered paper-making centuries ago, and while the technique hadn't yet fully spread westward, paper itself, light, rollable, and cheap compared to parchment, was becoming a silent disruptor of empires. You imagine a scroll, tucked inside a merchant's robe, making its way from Chang'an to Baghdad, whispered over in candlelight by some sleep-deprived translator with ink-stained fingers. One scroll in your pack is said to be a Buddhist sutra, another, a ledger from a copper mine, and a third a mystery. No one in the caravan can read it. The script looks like someone sneezed mid-sentence. Rakshan claims it might be a love poem. Baras thinks it's a mushroom recipe. You quietly hope for both. Historians still argue how many scientific, religious, and philosophical ideas truly passed along the silk routes, and how many just wandered aimlessly in merchants' saddlebags, never reaching the right eyes. But clearly, something traveled. Concepts migrated. Empires learned. You pass through a small village where the main building is a library. Not a grand marble thing, but a simple stone house with scrolls stacked neatly in clay jars. The librarian, an elderly man who seems made of dust and wood, offers tea, and a quick inspection of your scrolls. He peers at the mushroom poem recipe hybrid, squints, tilts his head. "Ah," he says, "this is upside down." You wait, hopeful. He flips it and nods. Still nonsense. The librarian invites you inside, where he shows you a shelf of documents written in 10 languages, all translations of the same medicinal handbook. He chuckles as he reads aloud a passage about heating goose bile to treat melancholy. You ask if it works. He shrugs. "I've never been that sad." Back outside, the mist begins to lift. The caravan pushes onward. You pass groves of fig trees and see a woman carrying books in a clay pot balanced on her head. She nods as you pass. The sun returns, painting the road in gold. At a narrow pass, the caravan halts briefly to let another group pass. Traders from the east, leading donkeys stacked with bundles. You chat briefly with one of them, a young man with ink on his sleeves and a sly grin. He offers to trade you a puzzle box for one of your scrolls. You politely decline. He says, "Smart choice. The box is missing a piece." That night, camp is quiet. Even the camels seem subdued. You sit beside a flickering lamp, the scrolls stacked at your side like sleeping cats. You unroll one and trace the faded ink with your finger. You can't read it, but you can imagine it. The hand that wrote it. The candlelight it was written by. The journey it has made to reach you, here, in the dark, before bed. Rakshan tells you a story of a caravan that once carried a single sheet of paper so valuable that they disguised it as cheese. It arrived moldy but intact. You sleep beside the scrolls tonight, just in case they decide to run off and write their own stories. You wake to find a small clay amulet in your boot. No one admits to putting it there, but Rakshan winks suspiciously, and Baras says, "Consider it your passport." You hold it up. It's warm from the sun, roughly thumb-sized, with an impression of a lion on one side and a crude star on the other. Protection, Baras explains, or maybe just decorative. Depends who's bribing who. You're learning that out here, safety isn't about swords. It's about systems, rituals, symbols, and, most critically, well-timed generosity. The silk routes may seem wild and untamed in the textbooks, but the truth is more bureaucratic than bandit-laden. You're entering a region where multiple kingdoms, warlords, and city-states demand tribute from every caravan that crosses their dusty doorsteps. Some request coins, others demand gifts. And if you prefer compliments so over the top they sound like wedding toasts, today, you learn the subtle, exhausting art of not getting robbed. It begins with the caravan's flags. Brightly dyed banners flap from tall poles, their patterns identifying your group as peaceful merchants who paid last time and hopefully will. Again, these signals matter. A red and gold chevron might indicate you've paid protection to a local clan. A crescent shape in white might show safe passage through a Buddhist kingdom. You stop at a toll gate around midday. It's a crumbling archway manned by 3 guards wearing mismatched helmets and long, skeptical expressions. One leans on a spear, one counts coins, one eats a boiled egg with alarming focus. Baras dismounts, adjusts his scarf, and walks forward like he's entering a party where he knows the host and the gossip. He begins with flattery, praises their fine gait, their alert posture, their stunning management of dust. The guard with the egg nods solemnly. Then come the gifts, 2 bolts of pale green silk, a jar of dried figs, and, for good measure, a painted comb shaped like a fish. It's ridiculous. It works. You pass without incident. Historians still argue whether Silk Route trade survived because of military power or mutual necessity. Some say the great empires tolerated each other because no one wanted to lose their cut. Others claim the merchants themselves, especially the Sogdians, were the real glue, maintaining relationships with bribes and baked goods. You continue on. The road narrows into a winding canyon. The cliffs on either side rise steeply, their surfaces etched with old graffiti, names, dates, prayers, and occasionally the outline of someone's foot. One simply reads, "Best raisins in Merv." That night, you camp in the shadow of an abandoned way station. It's little more than a roofless square of stone, but someone's carved benches into the walls, and there's a clear spring nearby. The caravan circles in tight, tents hugging the walls like sleepy birds after dinner. The traders gather to swap tips. Don't offer dates to that city's mayor. He's allergic. Don't call that general wise. He thinks it means old. If someone asks for a poem, make it short, very short. You scribble these down on a scrap of parchment. Right below your drawing of a camel with what might be wings. You were tired. Oshar shares the story of a merchant who avoided a robbery by pretending to be a holy man. He blessed them with walnut oil, she says, shaking her head. They cried, before bed. You examine the clay amulet again. Lion. Star. Simple. It hums with the faintest warmth from your pocket, like it remembers more than it lets on. You tuck it under your pillow, just in case, because out here, the real power isn't in weapons. It's in symbols, smiles, stories, and knowing exactly when to hand someone a fish-shaped comb. You've been walking long enough that your feet feel like they've grown new personalities, grumpy, uncooperative ones. The soles of your boots flap slightly, and you're starting to suspect Sorghum the camel is judging your posture. Still, you press on. The sky overhead is a sharp, cloudless blue. To your left, mountains that look like sleeping giants. To your right, endless steppe, broken only by tufts of weary grass and the occasional marmot with strong opinions. In the distance, dust curls upward like a whisper, signaling another caravan on the move. Today, the topic of conversation is reputation. You pass a trader wearing a crimson sash and 3 silver rings through his beard. He recognizes Rakshan immediately and bows with theatrical flair. "I heard your figs saved a wedding feast in Samarkand," he declares. Rakshan grins. "They did, barely. This is how it works. Along the silk routes, your name travels faster than your goods. Stories bloom like dessert flowers. A merchant who negotiates fairly becomes a magnet for opportunity. One who cheats, on the other hand, might find their next stop suspiciously full of unexpected tariffs." Oshar explains this as soft power, which sounds academic until you see it in action. The caravan pauses in a small settlement, a dusty oasis town with a single tea house and a makeshift bazaar. Despite your appearance dusty, sleep-deprived, vaguely camel-scented, the tea house welcomes your group with spiced goat stew and an entire pot of mint tea. Why? Because of Rakshan's reputation. Last year, he helped fund repairs to the town's well. This year, he's being fed like a prince. Historians still debate how much influence these individual relationships had compared to the larger empires and bureaucracies controlling trade. But in moments like this, feet soaking in a wash basin, hands curled around a warm ceramic cup, it's hard not to believe that kindness might be been the real currency all along. A boy sidles up to you while you sip your tea. He's maybe 10 years old, barefoot, and holding a crudely carved wooden flute. He plays a few off-key notes, then asks if your caravan carries any books with pictures. You dig through your bag and find a scroll with the diagram of a watermill. It's not much, but his eyes go wide. He runs off, leaving the flute behind. You pick it up. It smells faintly of pine and optimism. That evening, you trade stories around the fire. One man recounts how his grandmother once bartered a single embroidered shoe for a week's worth of lodging in a snowbound pass. Another boasts that he knows how to say good bargain in 12 languages, though no one can confirm if he is saying it right. Your favorite tale comes from a weaver named Timur, who once traded a bolt of blue silk for a song. The song was terrible. He still sings it anyway. Oshar tells you that Sogdian merchants like herself often served as intermediaries not just of goods, but of culture. "We're translators of everything," she says. Weights, measures, humor. You nod, remembering how earlier today she diffused a minor disagreement between a spice seller and a leather worker by quoting a proverb that didn't really apply but sounded profound enough to shut everyone up. The proverb, loosely translated, was, "Even the goat with short legs dreams of climbing the mountain." You don't know what it means. No one does. That's the magic. Before bed, you take a moment to look up at the stars. The night is velvet dark, the sky so clear you feel you might fall into it. You think about the flute, now resting in your pack, and wonder if the boy is still awake, dreaming of illustrated books and clever diagrams. You don't dream of much yourself tonight, just soft footsteps, the scent of mint, and the quiet power of a name well spoken in a place far from home. The next morning, you find yourself climbing slowly, grudgingly into the beginnings of the mountains. The air grows cooler, crisper, thinner with each step, as if the wind has forgotten how to carry warmth. The camels grunt their disapproval. Even Sorghum has stopped trying to look elegant. This part of the silk routes isn't for casual tourists. The passes ahead will take you through jagged ridgelines and narrow switchbacks where, as Boris cheerfully points out, one sneeze could ruin the month. You laugh nervously. He doesn't. As you ascend, the terrain changes. Gone are the rolling plains and dusty oases. In their place, moss-dappled boulders, forests of wine-stunted pine, and silent white peaks that loom like watchful elders. The silence is almost oppressive. No birds, no insects. Only the soft jingle of camel bells and the occasional exhale of something large and unseen behind the next ridge. Travel slows. The caravan tightens. Here, among the clouds and shadowed valleys, trust becomes everything. You don't simply follow a path, you follow each other. Oshar explains that these mountain passes have always been a test. Not just of strength or balance, but of patience. This is where tempers crack, she murmurs. And so do wheels. And yet, this part of the journey is also the most breathtaking. You pause at a ledge overlooking a glacial valley. Below, the world unfolds in impossible layers, cliffs and trees and winding rivers like silk threads, fallen from the sky. You see snow leopards in the distance, silent as myths, pacing along the rock. This high up, it feels like you've left time behind. Historians still argue whether these alpine routes were used regularly or only in emergencies. The logistics seem outrageous. Narrow trails, freezing winds, avalanches. But there's too much evidence. Sogdian coins found deep in Himalayan regions. Chinese porcelain fragments where they shouldn't be for it to be mere exaggeration. Timur tells a story that evening over lentil stew. Once, he says, a Buddhist monk and a Nestorian Christian priest shared a tent here. They didn't speak the same language. One offered almonds. The other returned the favor with tea. No sermon, Timur says, just snacks. That's the kind of diplomacy that built empires. You sleep curled beside a large, flat stone warmed slightly by the sun. Above you, stars flicker like uncertain campfires. The air smells of pine and old snow. In your dreams, the mountains hum. You follow a path made of woven silk. Each thread pulls you forward, softly, endlessly. When you wake, your boots are cold, your breath fogs the air, and someone has left you a chunk of honeycomb for breakfast. Soft power, indeed. By the next afternoon, you're descending slowly, your knees complaining with the caravan into a sun-drenched basin. The air warms again, the snow recedes, and soon, all around you, dust rises like incense. It carries new scents, frankincense, wool, dried citrus, and something vaguely goat-like. But you're not entering a city, not yet. You're entering a shrine. Well, sort of. It's not an official temple. There's no grand entrance or robed attendants. It's more like a weathered grove with stones ranged just so, little idols tucked into crannies of rock, and threads tied to branches. Every merchant here, it seems, has made a habit of stopping at this sacred waypoint. Some light candles, others sprinkle wine, a few leave coins or cinnamon bark. You follow Rakshan's lead and offer a handful of sesame seeds and a whisper, just in case. He says, the Sogdians, you're learning, are remarkably flexible in their spirituality. Zoroastrian fire altars, Buddhist stupas, small statues of the Bodhisattva Guanyin, even Greek-style Hermes pillars. It's all fair game. Some travelers here pray to Jesus, others chant to Shiva. Still others hedge their bets and pray to everybody. Oshar smiles as she arranges a small pile of amber at the base of a cairn. When your route is this long, she says, your gods get diplomatic. Historians still argue whether Sogdian religiosity was sincere or pragmatic. Were they true believers, or just skilled at blending in? But honestly, from where you stand surrounded by murmurs, incense smoke, and a line of camels chewing their cud in reverent silence, it all feels deeply heartfelt. You walk through the grove slowly, taking it in. A carved lion grins at you from a rock face. Someone has painted its eyes gold. Beneath it, a circle of stone surrounds a lump of melted wax. You nearly trip over a baked clay tablet inscribed in 3 languages: Sogdian, Syriac, and something that might be Sanskrit. You can't read any of it, but it looks important. Baras finds you staring. Want a blessing? He asks. Before you can answer, he gently bops you on the forehead with a dried fig. There, he says. Blessed by commerce. You laugh, but your eyes sting a little. Maybe it's the smoke. Maybe it's the moment. You settle onto a worn log beside the others. Food appears again: flatbread, tangy yogurt, something involving pickled radishes and too much garlic. Timur tells the tale of the caravan god, a half-serpent, half-hawk protector spirit who's said to fly ahead of honest traders and swallow bandits whole. You raise an eyebrow. Swear it's true. He insists. My cousin's friend's uncle saw him once, or at least saw something that looked like a flying carpet with teeth. Superstition. Maybe, but you've seen worse. Travel insurance. A monk in yellow robes joins the fire. He offers no name, just tea. When he learns you're Sogdian adjacent, he nods solemnly and says, your people carry more than silk. He doesn't elaborate. It's probably supposed to sound mysterious, but you're too tired to interpret it. As night deepens, candles continue to glow from the rock faces, reflecting off tiny bits of mirror embedded in cloth and shrines. You catch a glimpse of a camel kneeling reverently, or maybe it's just resting. Either way, the effect is oddly sacred. Before you sleep, you take a tiny thread from your tunic and tie it around the branch of a juniper tree. You make no wish, you whisper no prayer. You simply offer the gesture, like everyone else has, and let the soft wind carry it away. Tomorrow will bring more negotiations, more trail dust, more bartering with people who smile too easily and count your change too fast. But tonight, you rest among old gods, quiet rocks, and the hushed gratitude of a trade route that has seen 1,000 years of whispered deals and broken sandals. And somewhere, far above you, a hawk-shaped spirit flaps softly through the stars, probably wondering if anyone remembered to leave out dried figs. The next day, as the caravan rounds a hill and approaches a clustered set of houses nestled in an almond orchard, Baraz taps you on the shoulder and grins. "Hope you brought a wedding gift," he says. You blink. "Whose wedding?" He just raises an eyebrow. Turns out, the bride is a Sogdian merchant's daughter, one of Oshar's distant cousins, or maybe not. Everyone's a cousin when you've shared tents, recipes, and camel emergencies. The groom, a local artisan, half Parthian, half Bactrian, and fully overwhelmed. The wedding is happening tonight. It will also, conveniently, double as a trade summit. You don't even have time to protest. Someone hands you a garland of apricot blossoms. Another smears something fragrant on your forehead. Sorghum gets a necklace of dried dates and appears deeply offended. You are now a guest, and there's no escape. The courtyard fills quickly. Musicians warm up plucked strings, hand drums, a bone flute that sounds like a gentle sneeze. Silk streamers hang from the fruit trees. Plates appear, flatbread stacked like scrolls. Skewers of something spicy and possibly non-livestock. Pickled everything. Candied something. A group of dancers begins practicing in the corner. Sogdian weddings, it seems, are both performance and transaction. The bride enters wrapped in 7 layers of fabric, each layer stitched with a pattern from a different region along the silk routes. Chinese clouds on her sleeves, Persian lilies on her sash, Greco-Bactrian coins woven into her veil. You wonder if she jingles when she blinks. And the perfume. Oh, the perfume. You catch a whiff and are nearly knocked over by the swirl of saffron, rosewater, musk, and what might be roasted pistachio. Rakshan explains that Sogdian families often spent more on imported perfumes than on the actual feast. If you're not crying from scent, he jokes, you're not truly in love. Historians still debate whether Sogdian women played formal roles in trade, or whether they merely influenced it through family alliances. But judging from the way the bride's aunts direct seating arrangements and reorganize merchant booths mid-ceremony, it's pretty clear they run things quietly, effectively, and with highly coordinated outfits. You're ushered toward a shaded area reserved for guests of middling importance. The high dignitaries sit under an embroidered canopy, already exchanging samples of fabric, dyes, and what looks like fermented papaya wine. The rest of the courtyard sparkles with gossip and deal-making. You're halfway through a pomegranate when Oshar leans in. "See that merchant in the blue turban?" You nod. "He brought indigo from India. Wants to trade for Kashgar glass. I told him you had glass." "You don't. You'll figure it out." Before you can protest, she vanishes into the crowd. You sigh. Time to pretend you're a glass dealer. You spend the next hour haggling over imaginary products, complimenting beards, and inventing delivery timelines that would require the wind itself to cooperate. Surprisingly, it works. By the time the dancing begins, you've agreed to trade a fictional crate of glass bottles for 2 rolls of indigo cloth, and a clay figurine shaped like a startled goose. It's exhausting. It's exhilarating. It's weirdly comforting, because here, in this orchard courtyard lit by oil lamps and fireflies, trade is more than business. It's courtship. It's family. It's legacy. Every handshake seals something deeper. A promise, a story, a future. You finally spot the bride again as she spins, laughing, with a group of dancers. She's thrown off 5 of her 7 veil layers. Her perfume still lingers. The groom watches from the edge of the circle, dazed and smitten, holding what appears to be a goat. Symbolic dowry, Timur whispers. Or maybe dinner. Hard to say. As the music slows, a bowl is passed around filled with tiny glass beads. Each guest takes one and places it in a woven basket near the bride. For fortune, someone explains, and fertility. And maybe just because we like sparkly things, you drop your bead into the basket. It makes the tiniest clink. You smile. By the time the feast ends and the guests begin to drift away, your robe smells like grilled lamb. Your pockets are mysteriously heavier, and you've been invited to 4 future weddings and at least 1 goat race. Not a bad night's work for a fox-glass merchant. You find Sorghum asleep under a fig tree, snoring gently. You join him, your head resting on a rolled-up bundle of indigo cloth, wondering if the startled goose figurine you traded for will ever stop looking judgmental. Above, the stars wink like candles from 1,000 wedding tables. You wake the next morning with a slight headache, a suspicious fig stuck to your sleeve, and the distinct sound of someone playing a lute very badly. The wedding is over. The trade is not. All around you, the orchard has transformed. Where there were dancers and garlands last night, now there are merchant stalls, rugs covered with wares, and at least 3 goats pretending to be important. The Sogdian version of a pop-up market is underway and its glorious chaos. Baras greets you with a piece of honeyed flatbread and a warning. Today is for speed trading, he says. Flash bargains, tiny wares, big egos, you rub your temples. And diplomacy, he shrugs. Mostly snacks. You wander through the stalls with sorghum at your side, browsing bolts of dyed silk, carved jade charms, clay teapots shaped like camels, and spices that look like powdered sunsets. This isn't just an exchange of goods, it's a mosaic of flavors, colors, textures, and accents. Deals are struck in half a dozen languages, often with only gestures and smirks. And oh, the snacks. You try apricot leather stuffed with pistachios, fried lentil puffs dipped in some mystery green sauce, roasted mulberries sprinkled with cinnamon and crushed almonds. Timur convinces you to try something he calls sweet brain jelly. You don't ask questions, you also don't ask for seconds. A Chinese merchant with a hat shaped like a lotus flower shows you a brush that can write upside down. Perfect for spies, he insists. You nod sagely and offer him your startled goose figurine. He accepts. Why? You don't know. Silk root logic defies reason. Later, a group of children rush past you wearing masks made of painted bark and feathers. They reenacting some ancient tale involving a thunder god and a goose who won T-Pay rent. You can't follow the plot, but it involves a lot of honking and fake lightning. Oshar finds you admiring a stall selling tiny scrolls wrapped in silk. Miniature poetry, she explains, each one no longer than a matchstick. You pick one up and unroll it carefully. The words inside read, "Even dust remembers the warmth of your footstep." You blink. Is this a sales pitch? No, she says. That one's just sad. You tuck it into your robe anyway. Historians still argue how much artistic culture was transmitted along the silk routes. Was it incidental or intentional? Did art follow trade, or did it drive it? But here, among traveling musicians, fire jugglers, calligraphers, and wandering storytellers, it's hard to imagine that commerce and creativity were ever separate. A storyteller nearby begins spinning a tale about a trader who bartered his shadow to cross a cursed desert. Children sit cross-legged in front of him. A few adults pretend not to listen but clearly are. You lean against a fruit cart and get swept into the rhythm of his voice. The dessert in the tale is hot. The shadows are sentient. The camels complain poetically. And somehow, it all makes sense. That's the magic of this market, not just its goods, but its people. Everyone here is a carrier of more than trade. They bring fragments of home, recipes, riddles, lullabies, jokes that don't translate but still make people laugh. You spot a musician offering old Sogdian ballads on wax tablets. Rakshan buys one and presses it into your hand. Play it when you get lonely, he says. Or when you're out of figs. You've never had so many thoughtful gifts from near strangers. Or perhaps that's the trick, these people aren't strangers for long. Toward the edge of the market, a tall woman with tattooed fingers sells maps painted on silk. Each one is a little different, some realistic, others full of dragons, fire mountains, or cities that float in clouds. She gives you a discount after you compliment her earrings. You now own a map where Bactria is ruled by talking parrots, a fine investment. By mid-afternoon, deals are winding down. People nap under wagons. Musicians play slower tunes. Someone brews mint tea. Over a low fire, you sit in the shade with sorghum, sipping slowly, watching as traders wrap up their wares in silence. The day was loud, bright, smelly, and wonderful. You lie back against your bag of purchases and squint at the sky. It's so blue it feels like a painted canopy. A kite dances overhead shaped like a tiger, carried by a string you can't see. And you wonder not for the first time how many lives are changed, quietly and permanently, by days like this. A single scarf traded for a poem, a smile exchanged for a new spice, a deal struck with nothing but a nod and a shared joke about stubborn camels. The silk routes, for all their dust and danger, carry more than merchandise. They carry humanity, strange, generous, curious, and slightly sleep-deprived. You close your eyes and let the hum of the market become a lullaby. You wake just before dusk, the tea now cold beside you, your head resting against Sorghum's belly as he snorts in his sleep. The market is mostly packed up. The orchard is quiet again. But just beyond the almond trees, there's motion. The caravan is gathering, preparing for the next leg of the journey. Baras appears like a shadow, gently nudging you with the toe of his boot. "We ride tonight. You've got a place up front, with the lead traders. You must have impressed someone with your wild story about upside-down ink brushes and poetic snack trading. You stretch, gather your strange treasures, and check on the startled goose figurine, still disapproving as the caravan lurches into motion. The sounds of the wedding and the market fade behind you. The wagons creak, the camels grunt. Somewhere behind you, a child begins humming a tune from the Thunder God play. Ahead, the mountains look taller than before. The path grows narrower, rockier. The trees begin to thin. You pass a crumbling watchtower, half swallowed by ivy. Timur tells you it was once used by Kushan soldiers to monitor the route long before the Sogdians came. Some say it's haunted. He adds cheerfully. A pale face peeks from a window. You blink. It's just a goat. Further along, the road forks. One path leads into the highlands snow-dusted. Even in summer, the other winds through a canyon of red stone. Oshar debates the options with Baraz and a few other merchants. You're included in the discussion now, which is both flattering and terrifying. You vote for the Red Canyon. It looks less like instant frostbite. You explain. They laugh. They agree. The canyon is cooler than expected. Its shade a relief. Wind whistles gently through narrow passages. The rock walls bear graffiti in at least 5 languages. Some of it is simple. Names, dates, jokes. Others are prayers, poems, crude maps. A tiny carving of a donkey holding a flower makes you stop and smile. Historians still argue whether this kind of graffiti should be considered art or vandalism. You decide it's a love letter from travelers past. As you round a bend, you hear humming. Not the wind this time. Voices. 2 monks appear, seated on a flat boulder. They wear robes of orange and red, and one of them holds a stringed instrument like a bow stretched across a gourd. They offer blessings in exchange for stories. Baraz nods at you. Tell them about the upside-down brush. You do. They laugh. They give you a walnut carved with an image of the moon, for protection. One murmurs. And digestion. You add it to your growing pouch of inexplicable artifacts. Night falls, and the caravan stops near a shallow river. Tents rise, fires crackle. Meals are simple. Tonight lentil stew, dried fruits, flatbread. After the feasts of recent days, it feels oddly perfect. You sit with the others under a blanket of stars. Timur plays a soft tune on his flute. Someone tells a story about a phoenix who keeps oversleeping its own rebirths. You sip from a cracked clay cup and feel warmer than expected. Oshar leans over. You've done well. You shrug. I still don't know what I'm doing. Exactly, she says. Like the rest of us. The fire dims. A hush falls. Someone begins to snore. Sorghum, stretched beside you like a royal dog, snoozes dramatically. You close your eyes, and now we begin the gentle wind down. Dear listener, let your body soften. Just as the fires begin to settle into embers, feel the quiet wrap around you like silk, cool, smooth, comforting. Breathe in, slow and steady, as if you're in that canyon again, where the rock walls hum with centuries of voices. Let those ancient stories settle behind your eyes like drifting petals. You've traveled far, seen glimmers of distant lives stitched together by threads of trade, love, and absurdly determined camels. You've walked beside Sogdian merchants, eaten fruit from weddings, bartered poetry for glass, and stared up at painted maps where parrots ruled desert cities. And now the road fades, the night deepens, and the soft power of those old roots, the ones that stitched empires not with force, but with stories, scarves, and shared snacks, settles into your bones like a lullaby. Let the stars wink above you, little reminders of every fire ever lit by a traveler far from home. Let your breath grow slower, deeper. Let the soft hum of the silk roots carry you, gently, into dreams. You wake with the sunrise spilling gold across the river stones. The air sharp and sweet like pomegranate juice on a cold plate. Sorghum has rolled into someone's stew pot and is unapologetically licking himself dry. It's fine. No one liked that lentil stew anyway. Today, the caravan picks up speed. You've passed the orchard, the canyon, the quiet temples. Now you're in open country, and the rhythm of the road changes. Less performance, more persistence. The world stretches out in layers. Wide grasslands, slow rivers, distant herds, the constant crunch of wheels on dust. Timur tells you that this leg of the route is famous for horse thieves with manners. They take your animals, he says, but they always leave a thank you pebble. You laugh, until you realize he's not joking. But today, no thieves, just herders and sky. You pass a camp of nomads boiling mare's milk into a chalky white tea. One offers you a sip, and it tastes like someone melted a cheese wheel into a storm cloud. You smile politely. Your stomach frowns privately. Rakshan gives you a fennel seed and a wink. Chew slowly. Pretend you're brave. All around you, signs of the road emerge. Scratched stones marking distances. Half-buried way stations. Whispered names of oasis towns still ahead. It's strange to think of geography as gentle, but that's how it feels now, like the land is trying to help. Baraz rides beside you and points out a distant silhouette, a domed rest stop known as a caravanserai, once funded by a Persian queen with a fondness for peacocks. They say she made all the floors mirror-polished, he muses, so every traveler had to look at themselves. You can't tell if he means that philosophically or just as an odd design quirk. By midday, the sun is high and unforgiving. You take shelter under a woven awning with two Kazakh traders selling silver ankle bells and pine resin. One of them teaches you how to hum through a jaw harp. The sound is somewhere between a frog's hiccup and a spaceship warming up. You sound ridiculous. They applaud. Historians still argue how much oral music traditions shape the tempo of these journeys. Did melodies map the miles? Were certain rhythms reserved for uphill struggles, and others for descent? No one really knows. But humming beside a spice cart with your jaw vibrating like a malfunctioning cicada feels oddly perfect. You see a man balancing a teapot on his head while singing to a baby goat. You don't ask. You meet a woman who trades only in buttons, carved wood, bone, coral, pressed glass. Her entire inventory fits inside one shawl. Yet she claims to have crossed the Taklamakan Desert 5 times. You believe her. That shawl has seen things. At one point, the wind picks up, sweeping dust into miniature cyclones. Everyone pulls scarves across their faces. You peer through the haze like a desert detective and spot a stone tower, topped with fluttering ribbons tied for safe passage, prayers, and probably just decoration. The Sogdians stop briefly there. Rakshan adds a ribbon. Oshar lights a bit of resin and lets the smoke drift upward. You contribute a piece of silk from your sleeve, fraying at the edge, but scented faintly with last week's fig preserves. You hope the gods like dessert. That night, you reach the caravanserai Baraz. Mentioned, it's square, stern, and larger than expected, walls thick enough to keep out bandits, winds, and overly ambitious goats. Inside, it's bustling. Rooms open off a central courtyard. Traders unload goods, hang wet boots near fire pits, unroll prayer mats, and argue about onion prices in at least 3 dialects. In one corner, a group is embroiled in a heated chess match, using carved mammoth tusks. You raid given a cot with an actual mattress stuffed with dry herbs, and something that smells like cheerful mint. A local bard performs a tale of 2 rival tea merchants who fall in love during a price war. It ends with a wedding and a treaty involving 5 goats and 1 very caffeinated dove. The audience weeps and eats roasted almonds. After the show, you step onto the roof. The stars stretch out like spilled salt across black velvet. You hear someone snoring through a cracked window. Somewhere below, a donkey brays in its sleep. You sit beside a clay chimney, still warm from kitchen fires. You breathe in the mingled smells of turmeric, ash, and new shoes, and for a moment, you feel like you've always been on this road, that you were always meant to be here, among stories, strangers, and a camel who thinks he's people. The silk roots never move in straight lines. They meander, they breathe, and so do you. You wake before dawn, this time not from noise, but from silence. The caravanserai, so full of voices and clattering bowls last night, now holds only breath and shadows. The stars are still out. The walls hum gently with heat trapped from yesterday's sun. You pad quietly through the courtyard. A sleepy cat eyes you from a windowsill, then decides you're not important enough to chase. Fair. The caravan gathers slowly, like a long yawn. Wagons creak, animals grumble. Someone drops a bundle of dried apricots with an emphatic curse in Sogdian. You help pick them up, sneaking one into your pocket. Sorghum notices and sulks until you promise to share. As you pass through the great arched gate, a woman with a parrot perched on her head waves a cheerful goodbye. You don't remember meeting her. You wave anyway. The road today cuts through a flatter stretch of land, where low scrub rustles with unseen lizards and the wind smells faintly of copper. You travel beside a river the Oxus, Tamur tells you, or what's left of it in summer. He leans over and murmurs, the river used to be bigger, fed cities, made kings. Historians still argue whether shifts in the Oxus were caused by climate, overuse, or some long-forgotten upstream catastrophe. The truth is likely all 3. Nature doesn't like a single answer. You pause at the riverbank for a short rest. Children from a nearby village come down to gawk at the camels. One of them tries to ride Sorghum. Sorghum, in turn, attempts to sit on the child. A minor standoff ensues. Eventually peace is restored with dried figs and mutual confusion. At midday, you pass the ruins of what was once a merchant's palace. All that remains are crumbling walls, shattered tiles, and an archway so delicate it looks like spun sugar. Bara says it belonged to a Sogdian trader, named Artavast, who made his fortune in lapis lazuli and lost it all in betel nuts. How do you lose a fortune in betel nuts? You ask overconfidence and a gambling donkey. He replies, and walks on without explaining. The sun beats down. You cover your head with a scarf dipped in water. Round you, the landscape blurs into warm colors, terracotta, ochre, faded green. You stop sweating and start dreaming with your eyes open. You imagine what this place looked like before. The palace walls bright with painted patterns, the hall filled with cushions, women in flowing robes arguing over account books, parrots perched above tax records, and someone probably the cook swearing because the donkey has eaten the guest list again. By late afternoon, the road rises into a slope dotted with strange trees tall, silver-barked, with leaves shaped like fans. Ginkgo, says Oshar. They don't belong here, technically, but who does? A fair point. She tells you about a lost city nearby, swallowed by sand after its spring dried. Up the people fled, the pigeons stayed, no one knows why. A few bold travelers claim to have heard the pigeons whisper names at night. You make a mental note not to visit the whispering pigeons. Camp tonight is smaller, just a ring of wagons, a fire pit, and a patch of ground swept clean by the wind. You share roasted barley, pickled dates, and a slice of something called caravan cheese, which tastes like old ambition and footnotes. Rakshan teaches you how to mend a torn shoe sole with pine glue and a needle made from horn. You're not great at it, but the shoe survives. Your fingers don single quotes to progress. Before bed, someone starts singing a tune in a language you don't know. Others join in, the harmonies winding upward like smoke. The stars come out one by one, bashful at first, then bold. You look up and think, this road is a ribbon of time, tugged gently by footsteps and stories. Somewhere to the south, another caravan is probably passing the same point in a different season. Somewhere north, a scholar is translating a shipping list into rhymed couplets because she's bored. Somewhere east, a child is playing with a toy carved from cinnamon bark. And somewhere west, a parrot is explaining tax policy to no one in particular. You roll over in your blanket, the wind a soft hush across your cheek, and fall asleep to the sound of sorghum snoring into your shoes. You wake to laughter gentle, half stifled, like someone trying not to disturb the dawn. The source? Two traders attempting to fit a mule into a saddle meant for a sheep. The mule is clearly insulted. Sorghum watches from his post, chewing slowly, offering no help whatsoever. If camels had eyebrows, his would be arched. Today's road curls into the mountains, where the wind changes mood and altitude whispers in your ears. The sky feels closer here, less ceiling, more possibility. You breathe in cold air laced with thyme and snowmelt. Your bones creak like old scrolls. Baras nods to the peaks. This is where empires end and letters arrive late. The Sogdian couriers were legendary for their reliability, and not just for their endurance. They memorized long letters verbatim, encoding trade deals, marriage proposals, and gossip into rhythmic chants. It is said a good Sogdian messenger could recite a 3-page inventory of silk bolts, and still have time to add a limerick about donkeys. Historians still debate how these human dispatches compared to pigeon post or message sticks, but one thing's clear. When the terrain got harsh, it wasn't technology that won, it was people who could climb, remember, and charm their way through trouble. Oshar points out a crumbling stone platform by the cliff edge, a courier rest stop. They say one man waited here 7 weeks for the snow to melt, survived on pine nuts and poems. You pause there, imagining that man, alone with the clouds, composing couplets about moldy biscuits and missed deadlines. The road narrows, now more goat path than highway. Below, the land drops into a yawning valley, scattered with ancient terraces and the skeletons of forgotten orchards. You spot a flash of blue, a traveler's cloak perhaps, or just the memory of a peacock long vanished. Timur talks about snow leopards, eyes gleaming with mischief. They watch you, he says. You don't see them, but if they don't like your boots, well, he doesn't finish. You look down at your mismatched shoes and offer a silent apology to any feline observers. Later, you stop at a high village built into the rock face home stacked like bricks, each window box sprouting mint and superstition. Children run barefoot over the rooftops. A boy offers you a cup of yak yogurt. It tastes like someone tried to pickle a cloud. You smile. He nods solemnly and gives you a pebble. For luck, he says. Or juggling. You keep it. In the square, A storyteller performs beside a cracked cistern. Her tale, a trader who fell in love with a snowstorm and married a glacier. The villagers laugh in all the right places. You're not sure it's a joke. The Sogdians had a reputation for being fluent in more than 7 languages. Many were polyglots by necessity, flipping between tongues like pages in a book. Trade was not just barter, it was translation, negotiation, even flirtation. You watch a weaver sell a rug using only gestures, 2 coins, and 1 eyebrow raise. It's remarkably effective. In the evening, the air gets sharp enough to bite. You bundle into furs that smell faintly of cedar and unspoken complaints. The caravan shelters in a stone barn offered by a local elder in exchange for a small mirror and a box of dried plums. Inside, it's warmer than expected. Lanterns flicker. Someone is boiling onions. Sorghum has commandeered a corner and is humming to himself badly. You settle near Rakshan, who is sorting beads with the seriousness of a surgeon. Every color has a meaning, she says, and some meanings don't translate. She gives you one. Dull, blue-gray, like river clay at dusk. This one means safe passage when it doesn't mean goodbye. You thread it onto your belt. As the wind howls outside, the night grows hushed within. Someone starts a game of guessing which famous traveler you'd be in a past life. Someone else insists. They were once a sandstorm. No one argues. You close your eyes to the sound of soft laughter, a crackling fire, and the rhythmic clatter of beads finding their place. The mountains sleep lightly, but tonight, they're letting you rest. You wake later than usual, tucked into a heap of furs with your face half buried in wool that smells vaguely of smoked apples. And travel regrets. Outside, the barn doors creak gently in the wind. Someone has already lit a fire. The scent of millet porridge and cumin floats in like a sleepy invitation. You stretch, peel yourself from the blanket, and shuffle into the light. Sorghum greets you by knocking over a broom and pretending it wasn't his fault. He's clearly ready to move on. As the caravan packs up, the villagers gather to see you off, handing out small charms, a twist of thread here, a dried mushroom there. One woman gives you a carved wooden whistle in the shape of a phoenix. You ask what it does. She winks and says, "Depends who's listening." The road today is narrow and high, hugging cliffs that seem to scowl at your presence. You watch your footing closely, lest you slip and become a cautionary tale in someone's family history. Along the path, signs of older travelers appear. Stone markers, sun-bleached flags, even a rusted horseshoe nailed to a tree with no explanation. Barros points out an ancient inscription carved into the rock. Sogdian script, barely legible now. Trade agreement or love poem? He shrugs. Hard to say. Could be both. Historians still argue whether such inscriptions were left as public messages, private graffiti, or coded signals to fellow merchants. One theory suggests they were part of a larger storytelling culture meant to guide and entertain fellow travelers. Another claims they were simply ancient people, very bored and very bad at spelling. The climb ends in a sudden clearing, a high pass with wind-shaved stones and a stunning view of the valleys below. Here, you pause to let the donkeys catch their breath and to appreciate the dramatic landscape like a politely stunned tourist. Timur hands you a dried apricot. This was once a tax. You blink. In some cities, merchants paid tolls in dried fruit, easier to carry than coins, and more useful on cold nights. He gestures to a battered tin hanging from his saddle. Inside, a handful of sticky, wrinkled apricots, currency and snack. Down the slope now, the path begins to widen and descend toward a lush basin dotted with poplar trees and the faint outlines of terraced fields. Water glints below finally, a river broad enough to earn its name. Oshar tells you this was once a key resting point for silk route caravans, not just for sleep, but for healing. They had herbalists, bone setters, steam tents, even a massage tent run by a blind monk with opinions about everyone's posture. You laugh until your own shoulder gives a sudden twinge. Maybe that monk was onto something. Camp tonight sits beside the river, sheltered by wind-worn boulders and fragrant with damp earth and wood smoke. A group of local herbalists visit, trading tiny bundles of dried petals for foreign dyes. Rakshan translates, scribbling notes about each herb's properties and associated myths. You're handed a leaf to chew. It tastes like mint. Having a nervous breakdown, the herbalist nods approvingly. Good for calming the heart and keeping mosquitoes away. You decide to chew too. The evening unfolds gently. Someone strums a stringed instrument made from goat skin and stubbornness. Others hum along, voices threading the air like smoke. You feel a sense of calm here, like the mountains themselves have given permission to rest. Barros shares a quiet tale of a Sogdian merchant who disguised herself as a monk to travel freely and avoid suspicion. She spent years moving between temples, collecting relics and recipes, until she became a legend equal parts truth and embroidery. No one knows her name, only her trail, marked with tokens, a red thread here, a sandal print there, a prayer etched into stone with the words slightly off-kilter. It is said she once bartered 20 jars of cinnamon for a manuscript that turned out to be blank. Maybe she just liked the story better that way. Bara's muses. As the fire dies low and stars gather overhead, you lie back on your blanket, clutching your whistle, your pebble, your blue-gray bead. Small things with big stories. Above, the constellations drift slowly westward, traders in their own skybound caravan. You close your eyes to the hush of water, the low breath of camels, and the echo of footsteps long vanished but never quite gone. Morning stretches across the valley like a yawn, soft light washing over the hills, dew glittering on the grass, and a sleepy donkey somewhere in the distance trying to sing. You rise slowly, savoring the cool air and the last of the river sounds before the day's journey begins. Sorghum is already awake, gnawing on something that looks suspiciously like a bootless. You choose not to ask. Today, the caravan follows the river's curve through a narrow gorge. The cliffs lean in close, as though eavesdropping. The sound of hoofs and carts echoes against stone, creating a soft percussion to your thoughts. You pass the remnants of an old outpost, its mud brick walls melted by centuries of rain. Baras tells you it was once a checkpoint where Sogdian traders paid tolls in bolts of cloth, lengths of string, or to everyone's amusement a goat wearing earrings. Payment in style. Timur says with a grin. The Sogdians, it turns out, weren't just good traders, they were masters of adaptation. They often operated without a central government or formal empire, relying instead on networks of kin, contracts scribbled on bark, and reputations more valuable than gold. Historians still debate whether this decentralized model made them more resilient or more vulnerable. When things turned sour, some argue their lack of central protection led to frequent losses, while others say it kept them nimble, able to vanish and reappear like smoke in a windstorm. You imagine a Sogdian merchant disappearing into a crowd, blending in by swapping robes and accents faster than you can say import tax. At midday, the caravan stops near an abandoned caravanserai, its walls mostly rubble now, overtaken by fig trees and lizards with important schedules. You explore the ruins, ducking under archways and brushing dust from faded wall art. A painted camel still prances across one panel, nose held high. Rakshan finds a shard of pottery with Sogdian script. She holds it reverently. Inventory list. She says, olive oil, flax, turmeric, and something listed only as green surprise. Fairies abound. In the afternoon, you meet another traveling group, Gotani's monks transporting manuscripts bundled in saffron cloth. They speak slowly, with smiles that seem carved from sandalwood. You share dried fruit and stories in broken phrases and hand gestures. One monk points to your pebble, the one from the mountain boy, and nods. Luck, he says, tapping his chest, but also a reminder of what he doesn't say. The encounter reminds you that the silk routes were never just highways for goods. They were arteries for ideas, philosophies, even recipes. A batch of soup could travel farther than a prince, and sometimes become more popular. You recall a tale Rakshan shared, of a Sogdian trader who arrived in China with nothing but a handful of spices and a really good lentil stew. Within months, he was feeding officials, collecting scrolls, and politely refusing job offers from minor nobles. He named the stew after his horse, she adds. No one ever wrote down the horse's name. As the sun begins to dip, the caravan enters a flat plain dotted with ancient burial mounds. You move quietly now, the mood naturally reverent. Timur murmurs, this was once a battlefield, or a market, depending who you ask. Some believe the mounds mark a forgotten kingdom swallowed by sand and memory. Others say they were simply rest stops with excellent views. You don't try to solve the mystery. You just listen to the wind and the crunch of your footsteps as evening wraps the landscape in shades of bronze and plum. That night, camp is simple: a circle of canvas, a pot of millet stew, and a few soft songs hummed into the air. The stars feel lower here, as if crouching to hear the stories. Bara shares one last tale before bed. A merchant who traded in silence, offering travelers a chance to sit, undisturbed, for one full hour in a tent made of thick wool and cedar smoke. No talking, no transactions, just stillness. They say it made him richer than kings, Baras whispers, eyes half-lidded. You close your eyes and imagine that tent, warm, quiet, smelling of pine and forgotten questions. A place where even history takes a breath. You're asleep before you know it. You wake slowly, wrapped in quiet. The fire is down to coals, the stew pot empty but still warm. And even the donkeys seem to be practicing silence this morning. It feels like you're waking in the middle of a painting, brushstrokes of gray mist drifting over a gently rising plain. The caravan moves carefully today, tracing a route once famed for bandits, according to Oshar, who seems a little too cheerful about the possibility. They say the most successful ones wore silk robes and offered tea before robbing you, he says, handing you a cup. You eye it suspiciously. Despite the rumors, the road is calm. Birdsong flickers through the air, and occasional piles of camel dung mark the path like travelers' breadcrumbs. Mid-morning, you pass what remains of a Sogdian watchtower half collapsed, lichen-covered, and shaped now more like a leaning loaf of bread than a fortress. Yet in its day, this was prime real estate, a checkpoint for merchants, pilgrims, and camel herders with too many opinions. Rakshan reads aloud a scrap of poetry etched in the stone nearby. The road turns, but longing does not. She shrugs. Could be metaphor. Could be someone complaining about a detour. You pause for lunch in the shadow of a cliff shaped like a sleeping lion. The wind hums through, cracks in the stone, carrying the scent of juniper and old legends. Baraz hands you a palmful of candied fennel and recounts a popular Sogdian legend, the tale of a merchant who could predict sandstorms by listening to bees. You squint. Bees? Yes, he says solemnly, but only the anxious ones. Whether this is true or not, historians remain divided. Some claim bees were used as a natural barometer in ancient caravan cultures, while others insist it as simply a metaphor for paying attention to subtle signals like when the wind shifts, or your donkey suddenly refuses to walk forward. The afternoon's journey takes you through a stretch of desert spiked with tamarisk bushes and shards of old pottery. Every few steps, the ground crunches like someone dropped a tea set 1,000 years ago. You stop briefly at a well that's been dry for centuries, though someone recent or not has tied a blue ribbon to its weathered beam. Rakshan notes it was customary among Sogdian traders to leave small offerings at waypoints, sometimes for luck, sometimes in thanks, sometimes in memory. You can tell a lot about a caravan by what they leave behind, she adds. You consider this. What have you left behind? A cracked sandal, maybe. A trail of fig pits. A piece of yourself, quietly stretched across all these shared silences and stories. Toward evening, the caravan approaches a domed ruin once used as a signal station. Fires would have been lit here to guide travelers, and the dark code messages flickering across the skyline, one flame at a time. You can still see the scorch marks. Baras explains that Sogdian traders often relied on complex networks of lookouts, messengers, and even trained birds to send word ahead. Messages included everything from route warnings to dinner menus. One note, preserved in a scroll, reads, "Avoid second river crossing. Smells bad. Soup at camp. Bring onions." You laugh, and the sound bounces against the stone, lingering for just a moment longer than seems natural. Night finds you camped at the base of the ruin, your blanket spread on cool sand, the stars painting the sky in precise, glowing stitches. The wind has quieted to a whisper, and even the camels seem subdued. Baras plays a soft tune on a reed flute, haunting, slow, the kind of music that doesn't ask questions, it just waits. You remember the merchant who sold silence, the phoenix whistle in your pouch, the bee whisperer, and the blank manuscript worth 20 jars of cinnamon. This road isn't just a journey, it's a collection of other people's dreams, worn down to stories you now carry. And somehow, in that strange and quiet thought, you find yourself smiling as you drift off. One more sleeper under the old stars, on the soft power road west. You wake to the gentle clatter of a pot being stirred, dimmer humming tunelessly, the smell of something vaguely resembling porridge wafting through camp. The stars are fading, melting into that strange in-between color the sky wears when it is deciding whether to blush or brood. Sorghum the donkey is chewing on someone's sandal again. You try not to check if it's yours. Today's route curves toward an oasis town, small but significant, a stop for both traders and tales. Baras calls it a place where caravans pause and gossip gets traded faster than silk. As the sun climbs, so does the dust, kicked up by hoofs and boots and wheels groaning under crates of nutmeg, paper fans, and those tiny embroidered slippers no one actually needs, but everyone somehow ends up buying. The oasis appears suddenly like a mirage with better marketing. Date palms, a patch of water glittering like spilled coins, and a cluster of mud brick homes with faded murals and cheerful dogs napping in doorways. You feel it as soon as you enter, the shift in pace. This is a place designed for lingering, for swapping stories, rinsing dust from your feet, and pretending for a few hours that you're not sleeping beside lumpy saddlebags every night. Baraz introduces you to an old friend, Araz, who runs a bathhouse carved into the hillside. You nearly weep when you're led into a quiet chamber lined with clay tiles and steam. The scent of rose oil, eucalyptus, and something earthy, maybe juniper, wraps around you like a promise. The Sogdians, it turns out, were quite fond of bathing. Records and ruins alike suggest that their trading hubs often included bathhouses, places to not only clean up, but catch up. Business deals were sealed in steam rooms, gossip flowed better with hot water, and even rival merchants could agree on the power of a good soak. You settle into the warm water, limbs floating slightly, brain turning into sleepy soup. Araz talks while scrubbing your arms with something that may or may not be tree bark. There's a coin, he says, found near here, carved with a camel on one side, a laughing moon on the other. Some say it's a joke, others say it's a talisman. Historians, predictably, still debate it. Some argue the coin represents a Sogdian trade guild. Others believe it was a prank by an artisan who had a thing for celestial humor. You like the second theory better. After bathing, you're given mint tea and sit under a canopy with the others, watching the street perform its lazy rhythm. Children chase chickens. A woman haggles over saffron. A monkey in a vest steals a date and gets scolded in 3 languages. Rakshan points out that many of these oasis towns were multilingual microcosms. A single street could hold speakers of Chinese, Sogdian, Arabic, Tocharian, and Sanskrit. Trade required communication, and communication required compromise. The result was often something entirely new, hybrid dialects, shared jokes, and hand gestures that made perfect sense only after your 3rd cup of tea. Baraz purchases a scroll from a traveling scholar, its contents still sealed, its script written in a language none of you recognize. He grins and says, "I like a mystery." You suspect he is just hoping it as a recipe for that stew no one can replicate. As twilight descends, a storyteller takes center courtyard. He balances on a wooden crate, a lute in his lap, and begins spinning a tale about a Sogdian girl who could talk to silkworms. According to him, she once stopped a war by weaving a scarf that made its wearer fall asleep instantly. It's a bizarre and oddly comforting tale, one you'd like to believe in. You notice Demur nodding along, eyes closed, perhaps dreaming of sleep scarves and whispering insects. Later, lying beneath a tapestry of mosquito netting and soft stars, you replay the day in your head like a lullaby. The bathhouse, the strange coin, the scroll sealed in mystery. You've walked many roads on this journey, and each time, just when you think you've reached the end, another path unfurls, quiet and welcoming. There's a Sogdian proverb Rakshan once murmured when she thought no one was listening. The road never ends, it just changes shoes, and here you are, barefoot and full of tea, half listening to a monkey squeak in the distance, smiling at the absurdity of it all. Sleep comes easy now. You're back on the road by dawn, cheeks still rosy from the bathhouse steam, skin dusted again in the fine powder of the dessert. The oasis town shrinks behind you, its domes and palm fronds dissolving into a golden haze. Ahead, the road feels wider, somehow like the horizon has taken a deep breath and wants you to follow. Today, the talk turns to gifts, specifically the curious Sogdian practice of diplomatic gifting. Baraz, chewing on a licorice root, begins. You can tell a lot about a merchant by the size of his gift basket. Rakshan rolls her eyes. It was about subtle influence, not snacks. Indeed, the Sogdians were masterful at soft power, often wooing allies and foreign courts with thoughtful, exotic offerings. A Sogdian envoy might present a lacquered Chinese box filled with Persian dates, or a finely woven textile stitched with both Zoroastrian symbols and Buddhist lotus flowers. Not flashy, but intentional items that spoke without needing translation. You pass a crumbling stone marker, engraved with 2 lions facing each other, their paws nearly touching. Rakshan explains that such imagery was often carved at trade junctions as a kind of brand, a symbol of peace between roots and a promise of fair dealing. In some regions, lion pairs represented a treaty sealed through the exchange of gifts. Historians still argue whether these symbols were political markers or simply decorative art, but the lions appear again and again across the Silk Roads, like a quiet logo no one bothered to copyright. Midday, the caravan pauses beneath a crooked fig tree, and the conversation drifts to one of the strangest gifts ever recorded according to Rakshan. A Sogdian trader once presented a Byzantine envoy with an entire singing parrot trained to quote Zoroastrian prayers. Whether it actually sang or simply squawked Ahura Mazda every few minutes is unclear. Some scholars claim the story's apocryphal, but you decide you'd like to believe in the parrot anyway. It feels just eccentric enough to be real. As you eat lunch flatbread and pickled turnips, you watch Timur fuss over a tiny packet he has been guarding for days. Inside is a carved ivory comb meant for a noblewoman in Kashgar. It's not expensive, he explains, but it's been blessed by a Sogdian priest and dusted with powdered cloves. Sends a message without a word, he says, placing it carefully back into its wrapper. That's the thing about these exchanges, they weren't just about goods, they were messages in material form. Gifts were selected for their symbolism, their scent, their origin stories. A scarf from Samarkand told a different story than one from Taxila. A jar of honey from the Oxus Valley whispered of rare blooms and tame bees. A carved stone might contain an entire poem in gesture. Alone, Baras remembers another story of a Sogdian merchant who carried pomegranate seeds across thousands of miles to give to a Chinese princess. She had never seen one, he says. They say she thought it was a jeweled fruit at first. You think about how small things can change. Entire relationships, how something sweet, strange, and shared can tip the balance between suspicion and welcome. Later in the afternoon, the road climbs gently, revealing a panoramic view of a dried-up river valley. The wind is playful here, tossing your scarf into your face and then helping you fix it again. From this height, you can just make out the shimmer of a distant caravan heading west, its dust trail curling like a ribbon behind it. Someone in your group waves, and after a moment, a tiny figure on the other caravan waves back. You wonder what gifts they carry, what stories they'll tell when they arrive, what small object might change a stranger's day. Rakshan catches your eye and says softly, "To give well is to understand deeply." You nod, then glance at the pouch at your side. Inside, that phoenix whistle, a pouch of saffron, and the smooth stone you picked up days ago rounded by time, etched with nothing but a faint spiral. You don't know what any of it means yet, but somehow, it all feels like part of a sentence still being spoken. By evening, you reach a quiet rest stop, a cluster of tents, a cooking fire, and a trader selling glass beads shaped like pomegranates. You smile at the coincidence. As the sun sinks, the world turns amber. The gift of the day, a bowl of lentils, a clean blanket, and the realization that sometimes, the smallest things are what stay with you longest. The next morning, you wake to the rhythmic jingling of camel bells and the faintest scent of cardamom, rising from someone's tea. The world feels a little gentler today, less dust, more breeze. You stretch beneath the wool blanket and blink up at the canvas ceiling of the shared tent. For a moment, you forget where you are. Then you hear sorghum bray from outside, and everything returns. You pack quickly, stuffing your belongings into a now faded cloth bag that smells faintly of the oasis bathhouse. Outside, Rakshan is already ready, adjusting the straps on a new saddlebag that bears the stitched emblem of a Sogdian sun disk. The talk today is of legacies. The road won't remember our names, Baras mutters, but it'll remember the grooves we wore into it. You smirk, not sure if that's wisdom or indigestion. Maybe both. As you walk, Timur begins listing the odd things left behind by the Sogdians, not in grand monuments, but in cultural echoes. Words in Persian and Chinese with Sogdian roots. Musical scales that sound like desert winds. A recipe for pickled melon that's still made in a corner of Uzbekistan. Historians still debate how far the Sogdians' influence truly reached. Their cities Samarkand, Panjshir, Bukhara were vibrant melting pots, but they never ruled vast empires. They weren't conquerors, but connectors, and in many ways, that was the point. You stop by a weathered stone stela, barely legible, carved with 3 scripts, Chinese, Sogdian, and Sanskrit. A testament, Rakshan says, to multilingual trade negotiations, each side scribbling terms in their own tongue, hoping the other would meet them halfway. Nearby, someone's built a cairn of smooth stones. You quietly add one more. It's not for luck or prayer, just participation. A quiet hour passes, the kind where all you hear are footsteps, wind, and the occasional sneeze from a camel with hay allergies. Then, Baras breaks the silence. Ever heard of the Sogdian letters? You shake your head, so he tells the tale. In the early 1900s, archaeologists found a bundle of letters near Dunhuang, tucked inside a ruined watchtower, written in Sogdian script. They were heartbreaking and mundane all at once, merchants writing home about lost goods, missed family, the state of business, and the cost of silk in China. One letter, from a woman named Mune, pleads with her mother-in-law for help. Her husband had gone missing in China, and she was stranded, broke, and desperate. You imagined her sitting by candlelight, brushing ink across silk paper, trying to sound braver than she felt. That letter survived over 1,000 years, longer than most kings, longer than palaces. Just a woman's voice in the dark, still whispering. Timur sighs. People always think history is about big battles, but I think it's mostly letters no one wanted to lose. The wind picks up, and someone wraps their scarf tighter. Rakshan hands you a fig. It's slightly bruised but sweet. You don't say thank you. You just eat it slowly, letting the flavor settle. You walk past an abandoned well, overgrown with desert moss. A carved stone tablet nearby shows a man and woman standing beside a stylized tree. Beneath it, an inscription in Old Sogdian, probably a roadside inn. Baras guesses. Somewhere to sleep and argue with your spouse. The group chuckles. The humor is gentle, not mocking. It's the kind you share when you're all equally tired and sunburned and starting to dream in 5 languages. That night, camp is made beside a shallow river. Fireflies blink in lazy Morse code, and the stars are sharp and scattered. You sit by the fire, polishing the phoenix whistle from earlier, listening to Rakshan hum a lullaby from her hometown. Baras pulls out a pouch of dried apricots. For the road, he says, tossing you one. You've earned it. You wonder what you'll remember most. The taste of tea. Beneath a hanging lantern, the bathhouse steam rising like incense. The Sogdian proverb about shoes. Maybe it will be the silence between jokes, or the way the road never tells you where it ends. One last stretch remains, but for now, you lie back on the rolled saddle blanket, rest your head, and breathe in the scent of figs, fire, and foreign dreams. You close your eyes, and let the weight of memory settle gently across your chest like a silk shawl. The final day dawns with a cool hush, the kind of quiet that suggests the world is holding its breath. You rise slowly, feeling the gentle ache of a body well-traveled, and take your place once more among your caravan companions. There's a sense of ceremony in the air, not spoken, but understood. Today you'll reach the last major hub on this leg of the Silk Roads, the bustling trade city of Kashgar, where mountains meet desert, and merchants trade not just goods, but news, music, and myths carried in across half the world. The camels seem to know. They walk a little straighter. Even Sorghum stops trying to chew the tassels on Baras's robe. As the sun lifts higher, Rakshan walks beside you. You'll see it first from the ridge, she says, like a mirage with rooftops. The ridge isn't far. You crest it just past midday, and there it is, Kashgar, sprawling like a woven carpet laid out across the sand. Mud-brick homes huddle around tall minarets, and the scent of roasted cumin, dust, and sheep's milk drifts up to meet you even from here. But before you enter, Baras insists on a final detour, a tiny, weathered shrine nestled beside a spring. He says traders have been stopping here for centuries, not for prayers exactly, but for reflection. A pause before the noise. You sip the cool water from a ladle carved from bone, and leave behind one of your fig pits on the rock ledge. Rakshan says the shrine keeper collects them. He thinks the pits become blessings if you leave them after a good journey. You laugh softly. Guess I'll leave to then. The final descent into Kashgar is alive with colored children flying kites, apricot vendors shouting in 4 languages, musicians playing 2-stringed instruments you've never seen before. Silk banners flap from doorways, embroidered with images of deer, dragons, and constellations, and woven into the crowd. Like threads in a rug are other Sogdians. Some sell spices, others sip tea, quietly exchanging coded glances and finger signals. You spot a man with a sash marked in the telltale braid of Panjacant, and a woman bearing a ledger that looks just like Timur's. You realize now that the Sogdians didn't just pass through the Silk Roads, they became the Silk Roads. Not rulers, but weavers of people. Not conquerors, but connectors. You walk the markets with the caravan one last time, the smells and sounds wrapping around you like a familiar shawl. You pass a stall selling crushed lapis, another with dried rose petals, and finally, a calligrapher whose hands are stained blue from ink. Rakshan presses something into your palm, a small bead made of fired clay, shaped like a lion's head. For your next journey, she says, if there is one. You don't answer, but your hand closes round the bead tightly. The caravan disperses slowly. Some stay, some move on, some vanish into alleys. Timur says goodbye with an awkward nod. Baras insists on a hug and makes you promise not to sell the phoenix whistle for less than 2 goats. Rakshan simply smiles. You wander toward the western gate of Kashgar, where more caravans arrive, dust in their eyes, hope in their voices. A boy rides past carrying a satchel of almonds. Someone plays a tune on a reed flute. The same breeze that once carried saffron and salt now carries you forward. You stop at the edge of the city, just for a moment, and look back. The road behind you isn't empty. Not really. You see it in the tilt of your shoulders, in the sand stuck to your boots, in the way you now measure time not by hours, but by how long it takes to roast a yam or tie a bundle of wool. The Silk Roads were never just about silk. They were about connection thread by thread, story by story. And now, you are part of that weave.